All right, got the dash out. Of course, this is the back, and I knew this one needed help. As you can see, there's a bunch of patch stuff in here where apparently they had a meltdown at one time, and I knew that. And of course, common is in the fuse block where your primary comes in. Can't recall what this one was, but here's your primary wire. Of course, they had that bypassed and run through separately because of one of the meltdowns, and this is a common thing. I don't know that I would try to use a spade type bit for the amount of current that takes. Even in my 70 that I've done, very similar meltdown there. So I'd run a separate primary wire through the firewall and try not to run it through a small spade bit and melt out another block. I do have extras of these, so I'm going to replace it. Also, it looks like somebody's tried to remove the pad at one time. Again, you're going to have to take everything pretty much apart, get the glove box off. I'm going to disconnect all the terminals and things in here. I'm going to take pictures of it also, though, to remember where everything goes. And that's always, oh, there's another melted spot. Very beneficial to take still pictures so you know where everything reconnects. And actually, as you can see here, they completely bypassed the amp meter because that's where the primary typically connects up there on that side of it. So other than that, like I say, you're going to have to kind of dig around. There's some spots on the up underneath the dash here where you have some additional bolts that are holding that top pad on too. So, and of course that's the instrument panel right there, but up where the lighting and stuff is, there's some there. I can't recall again where they are on this part of it, but you can see where it's already coming apart right there. So if we can see it in here, I don't know. I have another one. But anyhow, there's quite a few nuts on there to hold the pad on, which is good. So disassemble it all. Don't try to bend it or anything like that, of course. Then once you get it all apart, my plans are to, again, fix this up, clean it up. I'll probably sandblast the whole thing, repaint it the trim black, get everything polished up and looking good before she's reassembled. So here we are with the dash again. I've kind of got her all done. I got the new pad on, just getting ready to kind of reassemble. I got it all painted. You got the light tubes here. Of course, I have an issue with one of them. The little pins have broken off on this one, so I'm probably going to order some new tubes there for the dash. Like I say, this pad is an original pad compared to the one that you saw when I was showing you taking it out. So I got this from a guy on Craigslist. Managed to find him out of Minnesota, I believe, who had an original. That's the only issue right there. So it's got a little issue right there. I'm probably going to try to, clip off a little spot here and just see if I can make that look a little better. The project today is after redoing the wire harness, and I'll show you a little bit of that. I'm going to go ahead and get it reassembled. I've been cleaning everything up and getting everything done. Of course, repainting these on the vents and stuff, and I have a little pin. I can show you how I do that too, and I'll explain that in a little bit. But yeah, going to reassemble today for the most part, get the wiring and stuff in, make sure everything reaches correct, because I did have to replace a lot of the wires with this. So here we go. Here, another thing you got to make sure you get here is make sure when you're doing all this, you get all these done here. Again, there's a bunch of these nuts here to hold the pad on here, so make sure you get them all. Of course, the dash is upside down right now because I'm wiring it. As you can see, here's the defroster vents here at this side. These particular holes are where it mounts down from the top. I don't know if you can see my finger kind of in behind there. So those are the bolts from the top that I showed you before when I was taking it out, where the bolts come through from the top side of the dash pad to hold it to the body. Right here are the pivot points that I told you about that mount right in the kick panel area. So these just slide over the bolt that's still setting in there. And right now, like I said, I'm getting ready to go ahead and get the wire dash harness put in and get it mounted and make sure everything reaches where it's supposed to reach. And then of course I've got all the parts that I've been cleaning up and taking in the house and washing up. I've got a few more to clean up. That's the bottom panel with the map light and stuff on it. So we'll just continue on assembling. When assembling the dash on this side, again, remember I'm upside down. You have to have this panel out, especially if you have AC. I don't recall on my 70, but this has to go in prior to, this is the vent on this side. So make sure you get that vent in before you put this corner panel in, because you won't be able to get it in otherwise. So make sure you get this or any pieces in here. Again, this is part of the trim finish too. Of course, get her wedged in there where she's supposed to go, and then everything will be a little bit easier to put together. On this 73, when I bought it, there was a bunch of wiring issues with it. It apparently, I showed you the fuse box earlier, where it had a meltdown and melted out the block areas, and where this wire's running through now, as you can see, I've replaced this portion of it. There was a lot of meltdowns though, and it's probably okay, again, if you don't want to spend the bucks, because right now I'm only, capable of finding one company that actually has the wiring harness, and it's $650 roughly. But what I've done on the hot spots where it melted through, and there was a lot of these, you can see here and here, take some time to do these right. Now what I did was clean them and stripped them. I fluxed them and actually soldered them together, slid a piece of shrink tube up here, went ahead and soldered it, and then of course put the shrink tube back over the repair and shrunk it up on there. And there's quite a few of them in here. Another thing you might want to consider is, if you look over here, I got a whole box full of wiring. Some of the actual leads that I found off of other harnesses that I harvested from the salvage yard, I went ahead and replaced what I could. Obviously some of these are run through here. A lot of this has been retaped, and what I would recommend is not using regular electrical tape, because it makes an absolute mess if you ever have to do any modifications. This is actually friction tape, so as you wrap the stuff up, it kind of sticks to itself, but it doesn't have a real sticky backing to it. As you can see here, it doesn't stick to anything other than itself. Works really nice for, again, for rewiring and stuff. And I rewrapped a whole bunch of this stuff. Some of it is existing shrink or friction tape on here, because it really didn't need to be replaced. Again, I'll do a little more cleanup and stuff before I put it all back together, but the friction tape is the way to go. The only other point where I may use a regular bit of electrical tape, you can tie off the friction tape in here, but one of the things I've done too is like this here, is I'll take that and finish up a wrap on it. You can tie it in a knot, save it, tie it in a knot. Well, sometimes what I do, just so it stays out of the way, is I'll take a piece of regular electrical tape only to just secure that down so it doesn't come unraveled at some point. But typically just a small piece, because it's only for unraveling of that. Sometimes you can, like I said, wrap it in between the wires and pull it and tie a little knot in or whatever, but again, I don't wrap it completely around. Another thing that comes in really handy is getting a schematic for your wiring. Again, once you look at these a while, if you've never looked at one, you'll figure it out, what all the plugs are, the light bulbs. This is for a safety belt, so on and so forth. And again, you can just take a look at the wires here. That's 12 gauge yellow. That's a 12 gauge yellow coming at the other side, and of course these are the plugs that go to the steering column, which tells you right there what's coming out, what they go to. Down here, when you're looking at the fuse block, it kind of tells you what everything is and the wires coming out. That's a 12 gauge brown, there's a dark blue, and the little asterisk behind it means it's got a tracer. The 20 black, it's a 20 gauge black. The parking lamp, there's a 20 gauge black. Again, and you can just follow the lead to actually see where it goes. I've actually, when I bought the car, the guy had the actual manual, and what I've done in here, of course, is just taken pictures of it or scanned it in my computer. One, so I don't care if I get it all buggered up, and I try to keep the book decent, but also you can typically find all of these if you go to a forum for your car. I mean, there's a Challenger CUDA forum out there that they have nice color of these and so on. So there's access to these so you can get it rewired right. And also on the dash, a lot of it's self-explanatory. I mean, if you look in here, let's see if we can see it well enough. Yep, right there. Again, this is upside down, but if you can see that there's a V for violet. There's a GY for gray there. So it kind of tells you where they're all going to go. These are for the ammeter and the front there. That I'm going to run separate leads to, because this is the one that causes the issue down here with the fuse block, because you have those large leads running through there. It comes in 10 gauge, which is really bizarre to me on the engine side, and on this side it's 12 gauge. So again, a real issue with wiring. So this is actually right now is a too small a gauge. I just ran it through when I was testing all the wiring in the car, but I'm going to go ahead and run 10 gauge through all this. And on the outside of the car here, I'm going to run it through and actually put a plug here, or I'll probably run this, or possibly run it through the firewall instead of using this so the plug fits on, and then essentially just bypass that, because I don't want that thing to melt down again, because when it melts down in here, and then in here there's, you know, quite a few repairs in here that I've made or replaced the wires. So I highly recommend that if you ever pull this apart, or even if you don't, that you should bypass these. Use your wiring schematics here to figure out how to wire it out. But I would truly, if you haven't had an issue yet, you're lucky. But if you look at that, you'll probably see some melting, and it could even be on the inside when you pull this block apart here to take a look at it. A little bit of a side note here, just to make you aware of something that's also available. Again, I told you before, so I touched on this. The silver around the edges. If you go to the hobby store, like Hobby Lobby or something like that, you can find these little paint markers, which are actually really cool to go ahead and do touch-up stuff, like to do those little trim things, to redo the letters or instruments, you know, on your instrument panel, things like that. The pen itself, like they're right here. I made a little mess of myself getting it charged up again, but real simple for if you're going to line stuff out again. You can just run the pen across it. You push it to get paint flowing to the tip. There we go. And then as you're going along, you can actually take this and clean up those areas, and it sticks quite nicely. They say, and this is like a regular auto, you need lacquer thinner to thin it. But if you're, again, fixing up things like that I use silver on, they've got multiple colors. Great little tool to for restoration stuff, as opposed to trying to use a Sharpie or something like that. And again, as she runs out a little bit, you can just give it a couple pumps, and of course you want to shake it up, get the paint loosened up and mixed. But this one's been in the shop for a few years, so again, it doesn't typically pool like that, but again, that's what I use there. Works great.